Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space, and thank you for joining us for today's event, engAGE Living Lab Showcase. After some opening remarks, we're going to begin with a podcast discussion on some current student research, and following that, we will open up the space here today to everyone for a research showcase that will include a media spa, digital Skillshare, a cell film booth, an Art Hive, a movement hive, and Sandworlds. So please come in for that if you can. But to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space. And Fourth Space is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And at Fourth Space, we work with the university community to help mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities that examine research questions and projects that are in development here at the university. We are running this event as a live stream meeting, so we welcome any comments or questions with a raised hand or via the chat if you're joining by Zoom. And for those of you who are here in the space, if you'd like to participate, just let us know by raising your hand, and we'll be sure to get one of our microphones to you. And with that, Kim, it will be my pleasure to hand it over to you for a brief word of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and do you hear me? Good morning, everyone. You're probably wondering who I am. My name is Kim Sawchuk. I'm the new director of engAGE, the Center for Research on Aging, here at Concordia University. And of course, the engAGE Living Lab is a really important initiative that Janice and other researchers at engAGE, as well as a fantastic array of students and other volunteers from the community and alumni have been involved with for several years. And I just want to congratulate the team, but also all of the participants for the amazing creativity and connections that you've made with each other, and how you've really pushed the boundaries of helping, I think, not just each other, but our society to think about what it means to age. So, my opening remarks are going to be extremely brief, other than to congratulate you. Just a few words about engAGE. You know about the engAGE Living Lab and all the wonderful work that's been done that I think is also connected to really important initiatives at Concordia that we call research creation, which is really thinking about what can be learned and what can be done if we do things together and really create forms and vehicles and spaces where we can explore play and creativity as an essential part of what it means to be human, I think. The engAGE Center for Research has four kind of quadrants that are all interconnected that really are we think about aging not just as a number, not just as a variable in research, but really as an experience that we all go through and that we have to both take seriously but learn how to live with and embrace. We think about aging as connected to what I guess from Black feminist thought and Patricia Hill Collins' work in particular, I would call empowered aging, which is not only about how we make ourselves as individuals have agency for the rest of our lives, but how we set up structures and institutions and fora and spaces and places to enable us to be able to have that experience. And I think the engAGE Living Lab has done that just marvelously. Culture, community, and creativity are key words for the Center for Research on Aging at Concordia. Community care and connectivity are. People who are researchers are connected to health, well-being, and the life course. And of course, politics, policy, and economics as well. So I know that the Living Lab has also been a space of collaboration and connection between researchers and the community. And again, I just want to thank you, the staff, Momo, and everybody else, for Rachel and all the students who we're going to hear from in a minute, as well as the wonderful Janice. Big shout out to Janice. And I think a little clap for the energy and vision that you've brought to the university and to all of us. So that's it. Thank you very much, and have an amazing day, and I'll be here in and out. Between answering emails, that we all have to do.
Oh, that was so great. It's nice to have Kim here. She's been so busy. And hold on. Well, this is really an exciting day for us because we've been working very hard together to create, that's fine, to create small spaces of social interaction. So the engAGE Living Lab was very special. As most of you know, we're also related to the Art Hive movement. And those spaces are incredibly alive with creativity, and people's initiatives come forward. We celebrate our lives, and we celebrate our losses, and grieve the deaths of family members, whatever it is that we need to do. It's very much a human space. The lab was a little bit more than that, in that it not only provided places for us to express ourselves, but it also brought together wonderful researchers from the university to help have a place of interaction between the two. So not only we had a lovely space at the Cavendish Mall for older adults, it became an intergenerational space because we had so many students that also joined us in the dialogues that we had there. The space was open throughout the week for 3+ years. We ended up being able to stay an extra 6 months because the people there were very enthusiastic and went and advocated for us to stay with some more donated space. So that was like an amazing attempt and success that we had. I think that what's important about what we're doing is thinking about social spaces as places for people, where people can have free and spontaneous activity that's not pre-planned for them, but that they design. So this opens up a type of communication that you don't see very often in urban life, or in really, perhaps it's more common in rural areas, but in the city, spontaneous spaces just, they're not waiting for us. You have to find them. So we're very lucky to have a network of about 40 art hives, and then we got to experiment with the lab, the idea of engAGE Living Lab. So that became even a more dynamic space in that we had visiting researchers that helped us think through things that mattered, but also to have voices from the community to say what wasn't working for them around that and what mattered to them. So we have researchers talking about what matters, and we also have community members. What I love about the lab and the art hives in general is that it's a place where you can bring more of yourselves to the space. So family members can come. You get to experiment with being an artist. If you don't think you are one, we'll convince you that you are. There's things there that you may not have ever experienced before that you get to try out and experiment with. And as I said, it's also a space to explore the celebrations of life and what's working, but also the things that aren't that we feel that we need more help with. So we're supported in a range of feelings and expressions. And finally, just to say that the lab is a place where public science, art making, and circles of care come together. They come together and help expand all three of those areas, and it gives us a new way to relate to each other, and it helps move us towards innovating a world that we would like to be living in. So for our future, more and more of these spaces are really needed, and we feel like we're a part of that movement. Thanks.
So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our panel of speakers, podcast guests, who are also being live streamed to our guests online, and this will be available to be viewed in the future by any one of you who would like to revisit those presentations. So I will introduce the 4 speakers that we'll hear from today. After each of the speakers, there will be a time for public discussion. So we invite you warmly to engage with our guests and to share your questions and make comments about what you heard. We want this to be a very dynamic conversation. Of course, our guests online can also be engaging in the conversation. We would love to hear from you as well. So without further ado, I will introduce our guests. So first you will hear from Berkeley Peterson, who is a PhD candidate in psychology. The title of her presentation is Check Your Balance. Berkeley is a third-year PhD candidate in the Department of Psychology here at Concordia University. And she is supervised by Dr. Karen Lee, who you'll hear from tomorrow, actually. Berkeley's research is focused on sensory motor cognitive aging. So her presentation will be in the winter of 2020. Berkeley began the first research residency at the engAGE Living Lab in the Cavendish Mall. During her residency, she welcomed older adults to come by and discover how hearing loss, simulated vision loss, and multitasking could impact their balance. During this podcast, she will share the results of this project and discuss the importance of having hearing and vision assessed regularly. We will then hear from Mohamed Abdalreza Zadeh and his co-presenter Gilles Chiasson. Mo has 10 years of experience working in Mo is a PhD candidate in the INDI PhD program here at Concordia. And he has 10 years of experience working in broad domains of architecture, service design, UX design, and socially engaged art. He is a passionate researcher and activist designer, imagining a world where everyone feels at home in their cities, regardless of gender, race, worldview, and social status. He is currently doing a PhD thesis on the role of art in empowering unhoused people. Gilles Chiasson. Born to 50s lower middle class Montreal, Gilles Chiasson quickly evolved into art as a means to express himself. From the late 60s hippies to mid-70s punk, he developed his own style, which he called anti-perfectionist art, brutism. He has since participated in a few community arts projects with a lot of personal satisfaction, including with the engAGE Living Lab. Their presentation together is called Blossoming from Cracks, Exploring the Relationship Between Art and Homelessness. Join this engaging discussion as we delve into the intricate connection between art and homelessness. Many programs serving unhoused individuals leverage the transformative power of art-informed activities. We'll explore the multifaceted aspects of this relationship, from how creative expression offers empowerment and healing to its role in fostering community and advocacy, ultimately shedding light on art's profound impact on the lives of those experiencing homelessness. Finally, we will hear from Carly McCaskill, who is a PhD candidate in communication studies here at Concordia. She will be sharing poems which are called Sandworlds, Micro, Macro. Carly McCaskill is a PhD candidate in communication studies. I said that. She's a research creation practitioner in drawing, painting, collage, storytelling, and poetic prose, specializing in communication and age research, care work, and respite literature, dementia, and memory studies. Carly has worked as a research assistant with the engAGE Living Lab since 2019. So let's hear from Berkeley to start with, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation with everyone.
All right, can everyone hear me? All right. So thank you, Rachel, for introducing me. I'd first like to say thank you so much to engAGE and their researchers and coordinators for allowing us as graduate researchers the opportunity to come and partake in the Living Lab. It was truly a phenomenal experience. So let's kind of just go back in time. It's winter of 2019, the Living Lab has just opened, and you're an older adult walking by and you see, check your balance. And so what I was doing in this study is looking at how hearing loss, vision impairments, and multitasking can impact older adults' balance. Now, it was the perfect time to do this because winter 2019, many older adults are concerned about how their balance might be affected on icy sidewalks. But something they don't often think about is how hearing or vision loss or multitasking might impact balance. And we know that 50% of Canadians by the age of 75 have either hearing or vision loss. And we know that hearing and vision loss, or hearing and vision and cognitive functioning in the brain are all part of coordinating balance. So if we have declines in those areas, or we have to multitask and take up more resources that we need, balance can be compromised. So as I said, we're looking at vision, hearing, multitasking, and multitasking in everyday life. If you think of balance, it's standing on the bus while having a conversation with your friend, right? You're dividing attention between two tasks. And with healthy aging, it's normal to have more difficulty dividing your attention and multitasking, and therefore this can increase risk of falls. So we go to the lab and we have our check your balance, and we literally just ask people, do you have 20 minutes to come in, get your hearing checked, your vision checked, and your balance checked? So how we checked balance is we used a Wii balance board, and as you can guess, it's maybe cut off right now, but if you're online, you'll be able to see. It looks just like a bathroom scale, and we just asked participants to stand on it. And I'll explain kind of the vision loss goggles in a sec here. So this is helping us measure balance. And then what we first did is had participants do hearing and vision assessments. And what was really unique about this study is I was able to take all of our equipment from the lab and bring it into the engAGE Living Lab. And this allowed us to collect from a very diverse sample of older adults that we wouldn't often get to recruit if they just came to the university. So we did the hearing vision test. We measured cognition in terms of memory and attention, for example. And then we had participants balance under a very different complex conditions. So first, everyone balances with their eyes open, just standing there. It's not too difficult. Next one, we asked them to balance while backwards counting by 7, so 100, 93, etc. And we use this backwards counting not because it's something you do in everyday life, but because it challenges the brain. Just like having a conversation or remembering items at a grocery store would challenge your brain. So then we make the condition even more complex. We have them balance with their eyes closed. And then we ask them to balance with vision impairment goggles. So you can kind of see on the screen there, it's making the room look very blurry, and we're trying to simulate a visual impairment. Next, the most complex condition is they have to wear the vision impairment goggles and count backwards by 7s. So we're adding a cognitive challenge and we're limiting their vision. So what did we find in terms of how did vision and multitasking impact balance? We saw that as we added a visual impairment or we took away the visual modality like eyes closed, balance got worse. Now, also multitasking also showed detriments to balance. So this shows that adding a cognitive challenge can be detrimental to balance. The other thing is because we were able to recruit older adults from this very diverse sample at the Living Lab, we also recruited people with hearing loss. And so then we were able to look at, well, what are the effects of hearing loss on balance? And what we found was that older adults with hearing loss had even worse performance in balance than older adults without hearing loss. And their balance was worse in terms of this left to right sway, which we call medial lateral sway. And medial lateral sway is a really good predictor of falls risks, which suggests that older adults with hearing loss are at a higher risk of falling than those without. So what does this mean in the end? We know that hearing loss, vision loss, and multitasking can all impact balance, and this isn't new. This is something that other researchers have also found. So how can you protect your balance if you have these, sensory loss conditions or you need to multitask? Well, one, if you're doing a multitasking scenario like walking on icy sidewalks and talking with a friend, try and focus on balancing only. If you can direct more of your brain's resources to balancing or walking, that can try and reduce your risk of falls. The other thing is if you have hearing or vision loss, it's really important to go seek treatment to get hearing aids, cochlear implants, prescription glasses. There's a lot of stigma around, wearing hearing aids, but there's a lot of cognitive and mobility benefits to wearing them. If you're not experiencing hearing or vision loss yet, that's great, but it's really important that you go get regular checkups so that you have a baseline assessment so that as you continue to get older, you can see if there's any changes in hearing or vision. And so the whole goal is we want to reduce falls risks, and that's why it's really important to be proactive about your vision health, but also your hearing health. And so I'd just like to end this today by saying thank you again so much to the Living Lab for providing such an impactful and memorable experience to me and my participants. This has been honestly one of my favorite studies, and I'm very excited to continue on the balance in vision and hearing loss domain as I continue with my PhD, and I wish the Living Lab was still open to collect more data. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to me today, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Berkeley. Do we have any questions from our audience for Berkeley? Yes, we have Mo, Gilles. Was there someone in the back there as well? Eli, okay. Okay. Mo?
Thank you so much. I was thinking about your data collection process, however I was in this space, but we always have a challenge to build trust with the participants, and the space that we gather data is also very important. I was wondering, how did you find the space of the engAGE Living Lab or Art Hive setting and the media spa is helping for data collection and building trust with the participants?
Yeah, so we tried to collect as much data before the Living Lab itself opened, like the media spa or the Sandworld, thank you. This was just so that we could reduce the amount of people in the room and just any sort of distractions. But what having the Art Hive and the media spa did was that people, when the Living Lab was open, they were coming by saying like, oh, I want to participate in these things. And then we could say, okay, come back at this time and participate in research in a more isolated, more safe area where there wasn't so many people around. So I think the Living Lab really did a good job at helping us recruit and promote research in the field of psychology. So yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, what role do physical fitness have with balance? I ask because I know we have a movement hive here as well. And I think a big part of fitness as you grow older is maintaining some sort of core, because otherwise you do tend to lose your balance. So that's my question.
Yeah, so there is lots of research. We specifically didn't look at how physical fitness impacted balance, but there's other researchers that have. And yeah, it plays a really important role, especially with aging. We know women tend to, or females tend to show more declines in balance at a faster rate than males do, and this can be related to osteoporosis, especially differences in how our muscles decay over time, which can impact balance. So strengthening those muscles through resistance training, doing cardio, these are really important factors that can help with balance, with walking, with reducing falls risk. So great question.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, thank you so much, Jill, for your question. We had Eli who wanted to ask a question as well.
What did we miss? We just arrived.
You just got here, okay. We're not going to redo the presentation, but maybe in like one sentence,
Yeah.
What did they miss?
We just did a study that looked at how hearing, vision, and multitasking impacted balance and found that when people are visually impaired, if they have hearing loss, or if they're asked to multitask, balance declines, and especially those with hearing loss, their balance tends to be much worse than those without hearing loss. You're welcome.
Do we have any other question for Berkeley? No?
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'll hand it
Well,
off.
I will say, as someone with hearing loss, I am really glad to hear that. I mean, not that it impacts my balance, but that it has a link and that I can do something about it.
Absolutely.
So I love it.
Good,
Thank
good,
you.
yeah. Being proactive is the most important thing that you can do.
Thank you. So let's now hear from Mo and Jill. Please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Mo, and my background is in architecture. And in architecture, we talk a lot about home and the meaning of home. And as you come back to your own definitions, you find lots of wide definitions, and each individual has their own definition. Coming to Montreal from Iran and working with the Art Hive and especially engAGE Living Lab during these 3 years, I found that we can make home or feel at home also at the public spaces. And that was one of the reasons that my topics was focused on homelessness. The other reason was that during the COVID time, that government asked people to stay at home. And some people doesn't have any home. And walking in the vacant streets and you see some people that have no home, then I come back, okay, what is the definition of homelessness? And my collaboration with the engAGE Living Lab, what is the relationship between art and homelessness? And I met wonderful participants and artists like Jules, and through these deep, long-term connections, we delve into these definitions. And in this podcast, we want to talk about the definitions of art and homelessness, and I'm asking Jules that how do you personally define these big, broad terms?
Hi, my name is Gilles Giasson. As it was explained earlier, I'm a child of the 50s, and my biggest difficulty was not understanding the challenges that were before me, before I was very old, and let me explain. In the early 60s, when I was going to school, by the time I was in the second grade, they were talking about holding me back. I had shown signs of learning disorders, but at the time, my family wasn't too fond of the notion, first, that I should be held back, that somehow this was a character problem, and I would just force him and he'll get it. And that didn't work. And by the time I was in grade 5, they'd asked me to repeat my year again and had to do summer school. The essential part of the difficulty in all of that led me to experience art as a way of vocalizing things about myself. I remember very early drawing the Batman logo from the Batman TV show, and I thought that was so incredible. I was like, I can draw Batman, I can draw the bat, I can draw his logo. And that sort of brought me into the world of art. And despite all the difficulties I was struggling with, by the time I got to high school, I had gained some notoriety. I'd been asked to participate in a couple of TV shows for those older Montrealers who might remember Magic Tom, and for our French friends, maybe Téléchrome. They had invited me, and through that I got a bit of a scholarship at l'École des Beaux-Arts. So by the time I was 14 or 15, I was a little into myself. I thought I had some value, but because of the family dynamics, that wasn't translated in the home front. Long story short, again, by the time I was 15, I was also starting to get interested in girls. And this painting and sculpting business wasn't getting me anywhere. And so I decided I was going to pick up the guitar and write some songs. And I thought, that should do it. I'll be a rock star and all the girls will love me. But it didn't quite work out that way. And this led to a series of problems with homelessness. And I guess in my own personal experience, my meaning of homelessness came to me as I felt that as I was an adult, I was 18 at the time, that I was paying to live in my own cell. I hadn't learned real good social skills, and all I felt like was that I'm living in a place that I have to maintain, I have to pay the bills for, but I'm not getting anything out of it. And so homelessness sort of became sort of a de facto option. So why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard not to get anywhere, especially on a social level? But that also affected my writing. There was also a bit of a movement at the time. We're talking about early punk in 73, 72, 73, 74, which I really got into. And at that point in time, that's kind of where I was developing sort of a resentment for the system, constantly imposing a bar saying you have to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, you're not moving up. And I could never attain that bar based on my experience as a child in the educational system. I was great at art, but everything else I was failing in. And so I sort of adopted this idea of anti-perfectionism, that I'm not doing anything to be perfect. If I do perfection, I'm selling out, and I'm going to resist it at all costs. And I called it Brutism because it sort of fit with some of my art at the time when I was drawing and painting. But it also became a way of journaling in my music. And in the process of journaling in my music, during that period of time, for about 20 years, I kept bouncing in and out of homelessness. Did I have a drug problem? Well, I had a modest one. I smoked weed, but it wasn't everything to me. Much of what I was doing was interested in the writing. I was writing about where I was in any experience or relationship I was at the time. This led me to a food bank in which I was volunteering, working for, which I helped out the resource department for people who needed resources other than food, and I would be able to assist them. And in becoming a member of that food bank and volunteering, there was a program that was developed by Dr. David Dillon of McGill University. And he wanted to create a writing group where people could come in and just share their writing. And the purpose of that, I later understood with a little experience, is that this wasn't the place where we were grading people or we were telling you got a C, but you got to work on your grammar. It's not very good. This is not what that was about. What that was about was giving people who wrote in private a chance to share their material. They were poor people. It's not like they were going to have an audience. And in the process, I learned to value the ability to listen and to see art from another perspective other than my own. And that suited me just fine because I was in that anti-perfectionist mindset that we don't judge other people's art. We accept it on their terms and we try to look for things in there that we connect with. Long story short, I was getting better because I was developing my own inner voice that had been somewhat compromised in the earlier part of my life. Over the years, I participated in several projects that were community-based art projects, and I was really quite happy and pleased with the results. And then I discovered the engAGE Living Lab, and I found that just about every time I was involved, I saw things, I said, yeah, that's exactly right, I get that, I understand that. And so that in a way, I may not have a PhD in the traditional sense of the word, but I suspect I have one from a living life experience. And all this to say that I have a great deal of faith in the engAGE Living Lab, in their program, and what they're attempting to do in all their forms. And I hope you keep evolving, and I hope you keep growing, and I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was so powerful and inspiring, this story. Yeah, and I want to come back to the word perfectionism and anti-perfectionism, and also connecting this to the meaning of home and homelessness. It seems that we're living in a kind of a structure that if your lifestyle is far away from whatever is defined, you will be excluded, or you just decide to go out of this. And I have heard from many people who are experiencing homelessness that we don't want to come back to the society. Mm-hmm. And also it seems that that structure is dictating some perfectionism approaches to the life in indirect or direct ways. And and you have redefined another term, anti-perfectionism, and you have discovered some practices in the Art Hive. It seems that Art Hive and engAGE Living Lab is in between, a space between that fixed structure, dominant structure, perfectionist structure, and the other structure that is looking for freedom. How do you see these connections?
From someone who's known homeless people and has been homeless and battled with it, I've come to understand that no one is homeless for some universal reason. We all do drugs, or we're all alcoholics. It's never that simple. And the fact that for those who are looking from the outside, looking in, can reduce it to something like that, just points to how uncomfortable they are with the actual truth of it all. Many homeless people are homeless. I know people who are homeless because they don't want to get rid of their dog, and they can't find an apartment to house them with their dog. And some may, from a distance, say, well, just get rid of the dog and you won't be homeless, and you're missing the point. And the point is that in homelessness, life goes on. People have sex, they buy food. The only thing they don't have is a roof over their head. They have relationships, they have needs, they have wants, just like everybody else. So saying that there's no universal theme in homelessness, the art often reflects it. I see this a great deal in our Inuit homeless population here, where there's a lot of carvings and drawings. And what's really interesting about their art is that they portray a lot of natural settings. For instance, whale hunts, or how their environment looks in nature, which obviously tells me how much these things mean to these individual people, that those traditions are important to them, and yet they're homeless. And so I see them owning their voice and owning their culture, but I also see how people kind of minimize and mock and belittle them because they don't know anything about these individuals on an individual basis. So I think of art in homelessness as a sort of a connecting their voice with their reality. Homelessness may have corrupted it, but art helps them reconnect with who they actually are and are able to express it. And that's really important, because without art, I can't imagine how they would survive on a day-to-day basis. They have very little else, if anything else. And we're quite content as a social sort of structure to leave it at that, even though we talk a lot, but at the end of the day, we're lucky if 100 people get off the street a year in Montreal. And so the role of art becomes very critical in sort of giving them their voice and giving them a little bit of dignity. I know it was true for me, because but for the fact that I had a guitar and a pen and paper, I imagine things would have been a lot worse for me. I can't imagine where it would have led me. But because I had a guitar and I could write music, I could at least speak to what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So art became a very therapeutic thing, without actually putting that label on it, because that's not how I came from it. I came as a form of rebellion. I'm not taking your crap. So I think that's where art and homelessness meet. It is a way to therapeutically deal with the fact that you don't have a roof over your head, you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You live in probably a certain degree of fear, depending, especially this is true of women who are homeless and children who are homeless. The fear they experience on a daily basis is traumatic. So art becomes a real safe way to experience it and to be able to talk about it. And that's sort of my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Do we have more time? Okay, and my last question is about allocation of the public resources, because there are lots of resources for addressing homelessness, and it seems that the problem is worsening instead of having less unhoused people on the streets. And even while we talk about the homelessness, and one of the definitions talks about the people who are at risk of homelessness, and if your rent is more than half of your income, you're at risk of homelessness. And we see many students and individuals are at risk of homelessness. And the government and public agencies always talk about, okay, what is the priority? And they ask researchers, I don't know, social workers, whoever who is engaged with the problem, what is the priority? And one of the priorities that we hear a lot is about housing fairs. And how do you see these housing fairs in connection with providing other public services like engAGE Living Lab, or how can we really find the right way to prioritize resources?
Good question. And since I do have a gift for a little bit of verbal going on, I'll try to be brief. A few years back, around 2016 or so, I had organized with a seniors building across my way a knitting circle, and I wanted to use real wool to knit mitts and gloves and hats for homeless people. And it got a little bit of airtime on the national news and the regional news and radio and whatnot. And I was once asked through that experience, oh, what causes homelessness? And I thought it was such a, and the anti-perfectionist in me kind of came out. I said the answer is they don't have money. And the money they need is not in their hands. They have no control over their destiny. They opt out of the system, if much like me, because they didn't feel comfortable with the system. And the system insists on regurgitating the same construct over and over and over again. We're lucky if we house 100 people a year in Montreal that are on the street, maybe 200. We got well over 3,000 documented, and it's probably, the higher figure is probably closer to 5,000 for people who are just on the border, just tipping over. The problem with most governments, and this is a personal belief, is that their attention span lasts about as long as their election sort of mandate, which is 4 years. And they're not going to attempt anything that will take 8, 10, 12 years because they may not last in the next election. So and these kinds of problems require decades of solving this problem. And they're not about to abandon this to someone who comes over and takes their job and tries to either improve on it or redirect it or rechange it, because it's not their policy. And we see that a lot in homelessness. Like I said, to have been asked why people are poor from a very intelligent, well-educated person, to have the idea that somehow they can't really figure out that they have no money and that they need money and they need resources and they need all those things, including art and mediums. You can't just take a person and put them in an apartment and say problem solved. They need all sorts of services. They need to develop, as with art, they need to find their voice in the things that they're doing. And that's not really happening at this time. I know that the Old Brewery Mission and the Salvation Army are trying to work on a more holistic approach. They're not just trying to take them and put them in. They're trying to group certain kinds of homeless people together, and then they're trying to work through therapeutic mediums to get them so that they can stabilize long enough. If let's just say they have a substance abuse problem, well, they're going to wean them off over a period of time, and in the process try to present alternative lifestyles that might fit them better personally once they are able to identify it. And art tends to help that, as far as I can see. So the importance of connecting art and homelessness is one of the elements that helps people get out of homelessness, not just an apartment, but get into life as a fully participating person without having to worry where their next meal is and whether that punk down the street is going to come and beat them up, or without worrying about being molested or raped. Those problems slowly disappear when we give them all the alternatives they can use to kind of feel better about themselves. It takes a while. It's not an overnight process, but our attitudes, have to change socially and collectively, especially with the government, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for sharing the deep insights, and thanks for this opportunity, engAGE Living Lab.
Thank you so much, Mo and Jill, for your insights. Yes, let's clap. A few more people have joined us. Welcome. And so do you have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to share with our two speakers here? Yes, please.
I have answers.
Answers, wonderful.
Can I, regarding what you said there a while ago about, I think it is best as a community we stop calling people names like the homeless, because we don't know why they're homeless. We just assume they're homeless, but homelessness could be a choice. Has anybody ever thought about that? But there are genuinely people out there that, because of circumstances, they need help. So let's help those that are looking for help instead of trying to help the helpless. Now, when I say helpless, it has two meanings. It has the people that just want to be helpless. In other words, the freedom is a roof over their head, the skies, all right? They like the rain, they like the sun, they like the stars. Those people don't want to be in a cage we call home. You understand where I'm going with that? The name calling is not appropriate for anyone. So please, when you talk, I know you're generalizing when you talk, just like I'm doing here now. So I think the best way to address all our homeless people is find out first who wants to be in a home. And if you can do that, then we push people in the right direction that they want to go, So thanks for that little knowledge.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Carly, please.
I was looking for the microphone. It's right in front of me. Talking about, you kind of started, when you started speaking, Gilles, you had said experiencing art is something non-vocal. Homelessness, in a lot of ways, is like that. I'm a PhD candidate, and as we know, we're in a province that has really high taxes. Everything is a lot more expensive. I live month to month. We don't know anybody's story or anything like that, or where they come from. Going off this idea of, what does homelessness mean? And there's a lot of stigma attached to that. But there's somebody's child. There's someone that cares about them. I see a lot of judgment when you see someone who maybe we see as homeless or we presume as homeless. Maybe they have like an iPhone. You know what I mean? I think the biggest thing is doing what you can. I think like even making eye contact with somebody, saying have a nice day can make a difference. Doing what's in your means. Being an ally in making safer spaces, not safe spaces, and that's something I've learned through conversations with engAGE Living Lab, and I really like that term. Or that term that Dr. Sawchuk began with this idea of empowered aging. Maybe we're, empowered citizens, empowered people. How can we connect with other people and build communities and just make sure that people are being seen and heard and doing what we can? Because maybe someone verbalizes that they don't want help, but I think it's still important to just show up and be there. So, yeah.
I have a feedback. Thanks, Edward and Carly. What we see that there are lots of stigmas around homelessness, and even the way we define homelessness and the keyword, it builds identity for the people that we don't know them well. And we're living in such a polarized society that we don't have enough time and space to know each other deeply. And even in the university context, we are experiencing that many students are at risk of homelessness. They should pay the tuition fees. They should put all of their time in the school. For students in Canada are looking for food baskets. And they're coming from these experiences to the society with lots of pressure. And they have no time to find their own place in the society and how they can give back to the public rights, public services for the society. And I think that here, what you're saying, we can also challenge the role of university.
I'd just like to add, yeah, homelessness is a choice. But if you take, for instance, someone who's being beaten down at their home for whatever reason and living in the street, homelessness becomes a choice. You want to get away from the violence. You want to get away from the abuse. And the system may not be responding to your needs in a timely or effective manner. It's still a choice. But it's a choice between two bad choices. And a lot of people are faced with that dilemma that their choices are very, very limited. And when push comes to shove, they'll choose homelessness. I knew a man who had a dog and he couldn't find an apartment. He didn't choose to be apartmentless. He chose to keep his dog, and in the process became homeless. Those were his two choices. So it's difficult to understand homelessness and the desire to get off. Once you're out of the system and getting back into the system, the transition is not an easy one. You have to refamiliarize yourself with how things operate. You have to understand bank accounts, and you have to understand getting an apartment and paying a rent and paying the bills. And if you haven't done that for 10, 15 years while you've been living on the street, I'm sorry, but you're in for a heck of an education. So homelessness is not in and of itself anything negative. And the sooner we sort of resist the urge to make it sound like there's something flawed in you because you're homeless, the sooner we get away from that mindset, the sooner we can connect with those who are homeless in a rather practical and pragmatic way, where you can say, I see me in you. I mean, I'm listening to Carly and I'm sort of shaking a bit because here she is, a PhD student, and she's still having to struggle on a month-to-month basis. Give someone a traumatic experience in her shoes, and she could very well fall between the cracks, and we don't want that. We want the services to be there for everybody, and that sadly isn't always the case.
Thank you both for your responses. Was there any one last comment from the audience before we move to our next speaker? No? Okay. So let's now hear from Carly McCaskill.
I know where the microphone is this time. I want to thank my PhD supervisor, Dr. Kim Sawchuk, for being here, and Dr. Janice Timbotos for your continued support and including me as part of the team. All my colleagues, fellow researchers, and community members who are joining us today, as well as Force Space for hosting this event. What I'd like to do first is I'd like everyone to take a breath. It's a breath for yourselves. Another breath. It's for one another. And one final breath. And that's just for honoring the space, the work, the research, the conversations, and everything that we're exchanging for the next couple of days. Today I'm not going to actually be talking about my personal research. I'm going through ethics, so it's a choice. a mandatory one. I'm going to share a piece of writing that's reflecting on one of the research projects that's called Sandworld. From the point of view of us actually a participant. Grit becomes imagination here. Within the four walls, we play with shapes, weaving in and outside. Half a grain object cannot be deciphered. Two clear marbles are seen close together, reflecting light. One looks like a mirror with a dandelion growing inside it, while its buddy has two mountains and two hills going on an adventure in a canoe. Falling between fingertips so quickly, yet so slowly, you control the tempo and what happens in this space. A little higher up, an abstract hand feather flame form is grounded in a flower with 10 petals. Like the marbles, there is transparency that allows the light to pass through the object, but not completely. It feels like the table or fire pit that is the center for a circle of care. There is something innocent and familiar, soft, soothing the soul. 5 sails, 2 flags, a silver ship makes its way, leaving hints of the robin egg sky blue bottom, shades of ochre, almond, chocolate, taupe, gold, bronze, salt and pepper mixed on top. Remembering childhood where anything is possible, building castles and mountains ever so high. Nearby, on Pinecone Island, the large brown eye of the content squirrel keeps watch. It is Wednesday. There is a zebra jumpsuit to be worn and gardening to be done. Bearing secrets and finding treasures lost, pure and simple. 4 pink roses are in bloom with some signs of decay. One single vine reaches above them toward the ship, bringing protection, solitude, relaxation, and dreams. A family of 6, some with rosy cheeks and some without, get comfortable, settling in, enjoying the view. They make friends with a lone gray bear who shares an old-fashioned dusty pink and blue umbrella with the oldest member of the group. Smooth, round, micro, rough, moldable, transformative. An alligator eye floats in a murky moss balloon. This is what it is reflected inside, the blackish green marble that partly bookends the community. It is about playing, imagining, discovering something new. An expressive form to communicate thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Through creating scenes using miniature objects, a story takes form. It reveals something about my inner world, desires or fears, maybe a little bit of both, through the choices of objects and their arrangements in the sand. Thank you for your time, care, and listening to these words.
Thank you, Carly. My microphone is muted. I'm sorry. That was wonderful. Thank you. And do we have anyone who would like to share something with Carly or contribute to the conversation? Yes.
I really enjoyed that, and I'm going to tell you what I enjoyed.
The microphone.
It felt, oh, sorry. I really enjoyed that, and I'm going to tell you why. Because your meter sort of reminded me of like a bumblebee or a butterfly, sort of going from theme to color to place. There was a sort of curious detachment in observing things, and it really tells a story. And I got to follow through it, and there were times where you were describing, at one point, colors and themes and shapes, and I could see them all. And that's a beautiful thing to do. That's a beautiful form of a poetry, but thank you.
Yes, Berkeley has a question. Berkeley?
Perfect. So I know you can't talk about your own research, but can you talk about some of the benefits of the sand world, whether it's quality of life, cognitive benefits? What are the experiences of these older adults, and how does partaking in an activity like this, increase mood? Or maybe it's just supposed to take them back into a time of their childhood. Can you talk about the benefits of it?
I'm not going to get too much into that because Dr. Janice Timbotos and Dr. Carmen Opry, almost good doctor. She's looking at me, I'm not a doctor yet, because she's doing her PhD. Almost doctor. They're both here and they're the lead researchers in that. I can share my own experience of being a participant. I thought it was a nice change just because engAGE Living Lab is like what we're doing now. We're around a table and we're sharing ideas and conversations. Of course, yeah, it's a little hierarchical because I have the microphone and I'm talking to an audience, but I think it's really like valorizing community and research coming together, and it's equal benefit and there's equal importance that comes to that. And I think that's part of the beauty of the showcase. Really, really early on, when I started working with the project, I was introduced to Sandworlds. So it's a big sand table, and there's a wall of miniatures, and you're invited to go and approach it and look at it and examine it and make your own world, however that looks like for you. And then afterwards, you're invited to fill out a questionnaire, and whether it's a story or a dream or an experience that embodies that. And I think that goes back to, like, everybody has some kind of experience as a kid going to the beach or playing in a sandbox or playing in the dirt or something where you're playing, and we get so far away from that as we get older. So having a chance to really just imagine and play is really therapeutic. I can only talk about, like, my own experience, but I invite people to come and check out Sandworld, and you can talk to the researchers themselves about the benefits of the research. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Yes, we do have the table in the back, so you can play later. Carmen, yes, that would be great if you can tell us a bit more about that research project. Microphone for Carmen.
So, first, I think I wanted to ask a question, Carly. And the question is not necessarily about the Sand World, is more about storytelling, because there is a story in the Sand World, for sure, that we are enacting, we are making there, but there are stories everywhere, and I think this is something that I see more and more, and it was part of our project as well at engAGE Living Lab, listening to stories of whatever kind they are, musical stories, stories in drawing and painting, stories in the sand, stories told because it was a safe space in the Art Hives or in the media spa space. So I wanted to pass to you, Carly, what is the story meaning for you in the century and probably in the research that you're going to do without being so specific about the research that didn't pass ethics?
Well, it's in revisions. It didn't. It's in the middle. It's in a gray area.
Yeah, but I understand why you didn't want to talk about that because it's still.
It's unethical. I'm sorry. So just to be clear, you want to know what the story is from the poem I've read, or?
I wanted to know the importance of the stories in general for you and for.
Okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. I think stories are about meeting someone where they're at, being totally present and engaged, slowing down, which I find hard. I'm someone who thinks very quickly, and I have to actively work on my listening. It's not something that I think comes easily to me, but I aspire to be a really great listener. I think stories are kind of like the primal thing, right? Like before anything with communication, if we go back, all the way back, way back, you go back to like cave paintings, right? Like this idea of symbols and imagery, and this idea of like what Jill said, it's non-vocal. Art is like, can be a non-vocal, it's an expressive thing. And what does that mean? And how does that thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, when we look at those cave paintings, what does that story mean? Stories are at our core. It's like our marrow. That's something that's like a tradition that has been passed down generation to generation to generation. And as we get older, there are things that stick. I like to think of memory like a wheel. It goes backwards, it goes forwards, it can decay, it can pause, it can skip, it can fast forward. Working as a respite worker, so like a relief worker, so I work with primary caregivers and their loved ones with dementia. It's all built at the core on a relationship of trust, and that's built slowly over time, which is a huge foundational teaching in engAGE Living Lab and Art Hive's methodologies. So I think that's just getting to know people and who they are and like what that reflects. It's going to be different from person to person. And I think that's the beauty, and that's like the joy in it. And it doesn't have to be happy. I like that in Sandworlds it can be something, it's honoring wherever that person's at in that experience. I don't even know if I like the word therapeutic with that. I think it's just bearing witness. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. And I think because we were talking about saying a little bit about Sandworld, that is really waiting for everyone to explore here. It was a research project. It is a research project where we want to understand if public spaces can have Sandworld and it will be beneficial. And we ask our community that came in those few Art Hives that had a century to come and share their thoughts. Of course, it was a questionnaire. It's research still. But to share their thoughts about how they feel, what they sense in their body after playing with sand, and what are the stories emerging in those moments when they play with sand. And the community was really beautifully responded, and I would say that we wouldn't be able to advance with research without the community at all, and especially for those projects that involve a community with us, it's built together. So again, I won't take time from from the speakers is just inviting you to experience the sand play and see how it is. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Ellie?
Carmen. Eli.
In the course of my work with the Maison de l'Innovation Sociale, the MIS, I came across a young lady who had an entrepreneurship concept revolving around the sandbox and implanting and at senior citizens centers.
Nice.
It might be an opportunity to try to link up your research and a practitioner and see how far along she's got. She's getting the mentorship from the from the MIS. That's the Maison Innovation Sociale, located here in Montreal. So I thought I would just link you up that way if I can.
Nice. Thank you. I'm wondering, we have quite a few people who have been participants in the engAGE Living Lab. Maybe you have experienced Sandworlds or other ways of sharing a story or being witness to a story. So are there any comments from participants about this idea of using the arts or the sand or the media spot to tell stories and to be a witness to other people's stories? Yes, please, Margot. Margot, do we have a mic for Margot? Thank you. It's okay. It's because, it's a big room and we have folks at home, so thank you so much.
Okay, I had the occasion to play sand, and I could not.
Oh.
And I had like a blocage, if I can say that. Je n'ai jamais osé. Je ne voulais pas. But I did play in the sun when I was young, and I know what is art therapy. I went with an art therapist many years, and I enjoyed it very much. But maybe 6 months ago, an art therapist offered me plasticine, and I had the same reaction. No, not me. No, I don't want to. But I like the colors, so I did start, and my God, I had such a story to tell. It was very, I was very surprised of myself. But the invitation to go to the sun today, maybe I will go, but maybe I will not.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. And that's it. It's an invitation, and it's never, it's sometimes you are in a place to respond to it, and other times not, and that's totally okay. Yeah, it's, we never know. Yeah,
For me,
of course.
but I did not really ask myself why. That's all.
Yeah,
It's not.
completely okay. Yeah.
Just to add for Sandworlds, it's not mandatory that you participate in the research. It's okay if you just play in the sand, but that's also part of being in an art hive. You have choice. There's so many different materials to choose from, and it's also fine if that day you're just having, as you said, like a blockage,
Yeah. And we never know when that's going to come up, and we have to honor that. Yeah. Any other participant stories?
Can I add one?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, because there was the sand world in the Living Lab, after we had collected data with our participants on the balance study, there was often times where me and my volunteers would just play in the sand and have fun, and it was a way for us to kind of maybe de-stress from the day, enjoy each other's time. So I even think as a younger adult, I very much enjoyed participating in Sand World and just kind of escaping reality for a little bit. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's for all ages. Play is not something you end when you finish your childhood, or, it's really for all ages. We all benefit from playing. Anyone else? No? Okay. We're almost at the end of our time together. Yes? Lisa, yes, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I enjoyed playing in the sand, and I didn't have a blockage. I just thought I was becoming a child again. Like, so I think it would be very beneficial in other senior residences and other places, like even in schools, like for kids. Like, kids love the sand, so maybe take them to a room where there's the sand and let them play. Like.
The idea to have options, right? Like that's what was so great about the engAGE Living Lab and is repeated here is all those options. Maybe for someone it's the sand, for others it's the art or the video games or the music or, you know, the movement. There's something for everyone to play with and to hopefully find something that works for you and that brings you a moment of pleasure, a moment of release, a moment of breathing, taking time for yourself and taking time to connect with others as well. Yeah, so yes, we are almost at the end of our time. I'm wondering if we had any comments from online or questions?
I don't think there's any comments or questions online.
At this moment, okay. I was wondering, Janice, as the PI of this project and the supervisor of at least one of the speakers here, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to offer as a closing remark, perhaps? I think Kim has left. I would have asked her as well, but yeah, should have asked her earlier.
Yeah, she had to get back to work. Well, thank you. I mean, it was like really interesting. It was so good to hear from each one of you with your point of view. And Carly, your poem was incredible, and I could see your art the entire time you were talking. Yeah, well, I didn't get to see that, so. But anyway, I just want to say thank you. And please stay with us, come back this afternoon, because we want to engage you in the activities of the lab. And it would be fun to see what you think of it and how it will work. Also, if we are speaking, if there is something going on, please feel free to make art while that's happening. I meant to say that to you before. But I think we could close for now and appreciate very much everyone's talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Unless there was any final word? No? Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone. So we are going to break for lunch. As Janice just said, we reopen at 1, and we have all of these activities for you to experiment with, play with, and engage with one another. So we hope that you come back for the afternoon. And if you cannot come back, but you still want to experiment it before you leave the space, please by all means do. We're not closing the space, we're just taking a little break. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're closing up the Zoom now, but the conversation remains online on our YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out or share. And please, yes, come back, as Rachel has mentioned, for this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Bye.